Hello everyone, Fashi and welcome back to Web Dev in 10, where we simplify the web for you in 10 minutes or even less. This is the 6th video in our React Hook series, and in today's video I'm going to be explaining the UseMemo hook. So let me not waste too much of your time and get right into it. So what is a UseMemo hook? A UseMemo hook is a React hook that memorizes the result of a function, thereby preventing unnecessary recalculation and optimizing the performance of your components. What does this mean? This means that the UseMemo hook performs a particular calculation, addition, subtraction, any complex calculations, gets a value and returns the value. This value is going to be stored in another variable. Let's better understand this by seeing how the UseMemo hook is declared. So the UseMemo hook takes in two values, a callback function and an array of dependencies. Inside the callback function, this is where we perform our calculations, and whatever we get as a result in our calculation, we return that value. And then our array of dependencies are variables and the things our callback function or our calculation depends on. That is, if any value in our array of dependency changes, the callback function is rerun and the calculation is done all over again. So this value that is returned in our callback function can be stored in a variable, which in this case I called it result. So the next thing I'm going to be talking about are the do's and don'ts of the UseMemo hook. The first thing is don't perform side effects in the UseMemo hook. The UseMemo hook is not used for performing side effects such as like our fetch event listeners. Don't call your API in the UseMemo hook. This is not the job of the UseMemo hook. The next thing is always passing an array of dependency. You can't have the array of dependency empty because the main purpose of the UseMemo hook is to perform a particular calculation only when a particular variable changes. So if you don't put the variable that it depends on, then there's no purpose or there's no use for the UseMemo hook. The next thing is don't overuse the UseMemo hook. I see some people using the UseMemo hook over and over again for every little thing. Use it only when you need it and when it is important. So don't overuse the UseMemo hook. Now that we know the do's and don'ts and we know how our UseMemo hook is declared, let's go right into the code. So now to install our React application, we are going to be running the command npm create vit at latest. So what's our project's name? I'm just going to put a tutorial and saying we are working with React, so go React, just JavaScript, not TypeScript. Now we can just open our file in our Visual Studio Code, which will be code./tutorial. Okay, so now that we have our React application installed, we are going to open our terminal and then run npm install. We're going to start our application using npm run dev. And now we can see it's running in our browser. So now I'm going to go into our source folder and our app.js and then remove everything in here because we're not going to be needing it. Just return a div and remove this useState as well, and also the Vite logo and React logo. So the first thing we're going to be doing is displaying a list of random numbers. So I'm just going to change this div to a section. And then inside we have an heading 3 that says random numbers. Now I'm going to go and create a state to store our numbers. So we're going to say useState. If you're wondering how I'm doing this, I'm using Emmet. You can also download it in the extension here. So I'm going to name these numbers and just return some random numbers. Right below our heading 3, we are going to map through the numbers and the index, so we can add that to the key. So we are going to return a list. Sorry, I forgot to put this in an unordered list. And then inside the list, we are going to return the number and put the key as the index. If you don't know how the map function works, you can let me know in the comment section. So I'm going to create a video explaining it. So now that we have this displayed, let's check our browser one more time. Now we can see our random numbers 1, 2, 4, 3. So the next thing we're going to be doing is filtering through the numbers and returning our even numbers. So const even numbers is going to be equals to numbers dot filter. We're filtering through each number, and we're going to return a number which remainder when divided by 2 is equal to 0. This is how we find even numbers. So we're going to go right below here, copy this, change the random numbers to even numbers, and then instead of mapping through numbers, we're going to be mapping through the even numbers. Let's save this and check our browser again. Now you can see that we have our even numbers, which is 2, 4, 6, and 8. So now I'm going to be adding random numbers to our list of numbers. So right here, we're going to create a function called add random numbers, and that will be const random number. By generating a random number, that will be math.floor. I'm going to pass in maths.random multiplied by 100. So it's going to generate a random number from 0 to 100 every time you run this function. So now we're going to set our numbers to previous number. If you don't know how the useState works, you can check out my previous videos where I explain the useState. So I'm going to be returning the previous numbers and the new random number. Right above our heading 3 here, we're going to put a button that says add random number, and then on click we can add random numbers. We can put the function inside the on click event. So let's save this. So every time I click this, we're adding a random number. So to better understand how the useMemo hook works, we're going to be adding one more thing, which is going to be adding random letters. I'm pretty sure you're confused as to where this is going, but eventually you're going to understand and see what I'm talking about. So now I'm going to change the numbers to letters. So now I'm going to be creating a function to add random letters as well. So const random letters is going to be equals to an array of letters. You don't have to put this much letters though. So now instead of putting 100 here, it's going to be random letters dot length, because we don't want the random numbers going outside the list of random letters. So right here, so I'm going to put this in square brackets, and then that will be random letters, and this is going to be letter. Down here, we're going to add another button called add random letters, and here we have another heading 3 that says random letters. So now if we check out our browser, we're going to see add random numbers and add random letters. So to show what the useMemo hook is used for, we're going to be console logging, filtering here to see how many times this calculation or this function is called. Let's save this and go back to our browser and open our DevTools. Right here, we see our filtering is called, and every time we click add random numbers, we see that our filtering is called. Even when we had add random letters, which has absolutely nothing to do with our even numbers, this is something we don't want. So this is where the useMemo hook comes into play. So now let's add the filtering in the useMemo hook. So I'm going to call this out and then call our useMemo hook. As I said before, it takes in a callback function and an array of dependency. So in our array of dependency, what do we want this function to depend on? Of course, our numbers. So let's paste our filtering here. I will call this const value, and whatever value we get there, we'll return it. So whatever value is gotten here will be returned and stored in our even numbers variable. So let's save this and check out our browser and click on add random numbers. We can see filtering, but if you click on add random letters, we don't see filtering, which means the function is not called when we had random letters, only when we had random numbers. To clarify this, if I should change this, even though it is not advisable, if I should change these numbers to letters and save, we are seeing a warning here, but let's ignore that. And I refresh again and I click on random numbers, nothing is going to happen. There's no filtering because the calculation depends on letters now, not the numbers. Click on random letters, we have our filtering. So let's change this back. Now we can see what the useMemo hook is used for. That's going to be all for today's video. If you haven't watched the previous videos, I'll put the link in the description below. You can check it out. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and also share it with your friends.